People, you're being recorded. So watch what you say.
Oh, no.
What's up, everybody? It is Movember. Happy Movember. Movember, yes. A mustache for Movember.
Oh, yeah, me too.
It's actually supposed to be no shade November.
There's 15 different things for every month.
It's also Native American Appreciation Month, okay?
It's also National Writing.
Something for everybody.
But happy Movember. Let's start with some good news.
National Writing.
It's National Writing Month. Yay.
So that's also what. Writing and.
Anybody with good news? You stood up. Stood up to or stood up?
She was late.
That's
She
right.
visited and I left.
Actually setting boundaries.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
What?
yeah. She was hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good too.
No, I was,
Like that kind of thing.
I'm at home and
Yeah.
I'm in my bed. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought you meant, yeah, I'm at your house, but you aren't here, you're lying.
No, she made me that. She's the one who's complaining about the people in the bathroom. Girl, ask for the shower. But I want it.
Okay. Good news. Go ahead, Lacey.
We went to the campus retreat and I think it went pretty great. Sure. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it went really cool. There was 2 people who got baptized that weekend from, I think Cincy and Lexington. And I think it was really cool. I know me and Abby had a fun time together. I think like being in that kind of environment was pretty cool for her to be in, and I think too, just like, I know it was relaxing for me that Saturday, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good turnout for a community Bible talk.
Okay.
Actual venue.
Actual good news.
It was good. There was a lot of good turnout. Yeah, like,
Actually, Ruby and Liz and Daniel were there, yeah.
I got
They got up early. They got there early.
Oh, she was there late to what she thought.
Early.
what it was.
It was 7:30. I was like,
We did that on purpose.
Oh, it's
Yeah, great, good conversation.
awesome.
Yeah.
Stayed probably 30 minutes over than I thought. I thought it'd be like 30 or 40 minutes, but it lasted like a bit of like an hour and a half.
Wow, that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Good time.
Come on.
It's a bonfire on Saturday, so, oh yeah, I actually forgot about it. It's popping in my mind, like, this Saturday, so
Yeah.
we do wanna go, they kind of invited all of us from
In Ashland,
the Ashland area,
4 o'clock Saturday is when it starts.
4 or 5, we don't know.
I remember it was like,
I remember them saying 4 or 5.
I remember somebody saying 7, but it didn't.
so all right.
Oh, maybe a bonfire.
Yeah, there is definitely a bonfire. You definitely know, let's.
Somewhere in Ashland.
Yeah.
Good luck finding it. Amen. Yay, a bonfire. Other good news?
I went to the DMV today.
Hey,
And I was there for like 4 minutes.
oh my
Wow.
God.
And I successfully got done when I looked.
Heck yeah.
Wow.
4 minutes.
Tell us your secrets. What time did you go? I
I
took
went
it.
at
Actually-
4:20.
Wow, that's,
20
well,
minutes before they closed.
That's-
There was no one
wow.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of online.
At the
stuff.
first of the month,
in.
Oh,
the first week of the month, like,
it's the second.
Yeah, but like everyone knows, everyone thinks
It's the
like,
first-
I better go there. They open this package.
Yeah,
No one's there. Last time we did. Great.
that's what I'm gonna do. I have to go this one.
But it worked, yeah, it was great, and I officially bought Ruby's old car from her and got it.
Hey,
Woo!
come on, Carbine.
I'm gonna play bingo.
You're gonna play bingo. Okay. Yay, bingo. Go ahead, Miko.
Tomorrow I have my final interview for the supervisor position.
Wow.
So the final interview out of 4. And yeah, I might need to buy a car soon.
Heck yeah.
Like I know a guy who's selling.
You like PT Cruisers?
How much?
No.
Yeah, not.
Sold. I literally just need a car to go to West End and back every day.
Awesome. But yeah, that's exciting news though. 4th round of interviews. It's a gauntlet. So it's exciting that 1, it'll be over, and 2, to find out the result of it. So, yeah. Cool. Any other good news? Garrett, you have great news. Yes, you do. You told me today.
You put him on the spot.
Okay. I have great news. So we had Bible talk today. And Bible talk was, well, you know, it's whatever, it's Bible talk. But afterwards, I left because I had other things to do. And Garrett and Jackson went and reached out on campus. And they went and like shared their faith, like they both went to the evangelism class at the retreat and went and shared their faith on campus, which is huge.
Yeah, they said that no one went to that class either. We were like,
Yeah.
they said like that was the least attended class.
Oh,
And yeah, everyone was joking around. They were like, honestly, that's the class everyone should be at, and somehow like no one was there. So out of like the 8 people, Jackson and Garrett made up like
Yeah.
2.
Wow. Hey,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
And so just
Put it to use.
just seeing like the impact of the retreat and going out and sharing your faith and like, I mean, I remember those first times of reaching out by myself, like reaching out on campus and how terrifying that is.
Yeah.
To see both of you guys stepping out in faith and making those decisions and stretching yourself. It's
Jay-Z.
huge. Yeah.
Good job, Jackson.
Oh, yeah. I think that's all of our good news. Sweet, let's get into the lesson. But before we do, let's pray. Dear Father God, Dad, I am so grateful for you providing this time, God. I'm so grateful for this rhythm of being able to come together for midweek and being able to talk and really talk about things that are going to move your kingdom forward. God, I am so grateful that we get to talk about evangelism, ironically. And God, I pray that you help us to refine our perspective, God, to understand truly what it means to be evangelistic, God. And I pray that you help us to grow in this area, God. I pray that we can be just great at connecting and showing people who you are. God, I love you so much. I pray all these things according to your will. Amen. Okay, so we've been talking about our church culture for a while, and we've been talking about how to care for people. Right? And today I want to talk about the need for changing our view on evangelism. And so, in terms of kind of sharing your faith, reaching out, we'll kind of kick it around a little bit here, but 2 questions. 1, how do you feel about evangelism? And 2, how effective have we been in Huntington in terms of seeking and saving the lost? Both in terms of a heart to seek and save the lost and in terms of results. Anybody?
What's the first question?
How do you feel about evangelism?
It makes me.
It's awkward.
I feel like I kind of choke up usually at the last second, like I'll think about it. And then
Yeah.
like, the moment passes and then I just like,
Yep.
Walking with you.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was like, what to say?
And then you feel like, then it's like, dang, now I feel guilty because I definitely quenched the spirit and now I need to find somebody. And then the next person walks by and you're like, dang it, I did it again.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I went to the park
Yeah.
on Saturday. It's there, and a couple came over and like pet Brom, and I talked to them for a few minutes, and then they like gathered up their kids and left, and I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't say it. And so I definitely like struggle with it.
Yeah. Ashley?
I was kind of like, taught growing up that, like, all the dues, so kind of like specific people.
Yeah, and I think that's like, that's a real feeling. It's like, well, I kid you not, I talked to somebody whose dad, his perspective on ministry was, well, you get paid by the church and what your exclusive role is to spend 8 hours reaching out. Because disciples are expected to do all of the Bible studies as part of discipleship. Like, preaching on a Sunday, like, if you have no full-time minister, that's part of discipleship. Like, everything that like discipling, all of those things are part of just generic discipleship. And so as a minister, his perspective was that you need to spend 8 hours a day sharing your faith. I think that is the most ridiculous thing in the world. I don't think that's a healthy perspective, but I think it very easily can be, oh, well, people who are in full-time paid ministry, like, reach out, share their faith, and the rest of us just, fill in the gaps if we can,
I'm sorry.
What?
So,
I could be a gym teacher, okay?
I mean,
but-
it looks nice.
But I can actually do things, those who can't,
Yeah,
Do
teacher is
teach.
the role for
yeah.
that.
Yeah. I'm glad somebody got that reference. Other thoughts about how we feel about evangelism or how effective we've been?
I don't feel like I feel like I have never reached out to someone and then actually, there was one girl, but technically I didn't want to go up to her and the person I was with wanted to go up to her. But other than that, there's never been a person that I've reached out to that has come out, studied the Bible, like, and continued doing things. So in my head, I am not effective.
Yeah.
Effective at the after part, like once they're there, you're ready.
Yeah, yes,
Interesting.
but I think I get discouraged in the before part because like I do feel more comfortable in the after part and like I'm better at building relationships, but that like,
Initial like, hey, who are you?
yeah, that part, like I'm just, if I don't like it, it scares me. And then two, just like with the results, like I think I could easily be like, oh, well, based off my results, like, I'm not very good at others, so why even?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, he's pretty good at it.
I'm pretty confident in the as you go portion.
Yeah.
And then also, I don't mind the full contact.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the same, but like versus like rapid fire,
Yeah.
like rapid fire of like a campus setting or something like that versus, you know what I mean? That slow burn.
Yeah.
Or like in the grocery store or something like that. I'm okay with any of it, but the part that I'm like, I see lacking is rallying, like having kind of like a point of like rallying for the community.
Mhm.
I don't think it's not really happened yet.
Yeah.
It's just kind of been the fact that like the focus has been whoever you're reaching out to,
Yeah.
let them know, like whoever's in your life,
Right.
you know what I mean? That as you go kind of thing, whereas I feel like it would be productive to have a couple of those like plotted
Yeah.
here and there. Of
Kind of set times to go.
like, let's go, Pullman or, as a group or something. I feel like that just hasn't happened in the community. Small group though.
Yeah.
Yes, that happened, but it was like, not like a meetup, not like a rally of like, hey, let's all do this and, as a group, like an effort. Let's have like a group effort. Because like not everybody, it's easy to to just get caught up in your week. If there's not this kind of like time set down.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I hear evangelism, I immediately think phone contact.
Yeah.
And then I think it's a couple of feelings.
Yes.
Phone contact comes with
Yeah.
rejection.
Yeah.
And the arguments you have in your mind with, I really need to talk to this person, and you don't. And it's like, wow, it's so.
Yeah.
What we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
That's just immediately what I think.
Yeah.
When you're passing that one person, the excuse for them is like, hang on, I'm talking about the first guy. You're good.
Yeah.
You're kind of a freebie right now, because I'm talking to myself about that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody online? You guys have thoughts?
I mean, I definitely take it from a sales perspective. Like, it's almost like, all right, gotta go get my quota today. Like, and instead of, and if you don't get like something going, you've completely failed. Even if like you go out and share your faith with people and no one studies the Bible, you haven't succeeded.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's such a bad way to look at it.
Yeah, I get that. I'm like, my job, part of my job description is evangelism. And it's like, part of the reason why I love November is because things start to slow down. And not that I stopped sharing my faith, but the first 2 weeks are brutal because all I do is share my faith. And the first 2 months is similarly brutal because I spend most of my time share, like it's an exhausting task. George Barna, who runs the Barna poll, which does a lot of kind of Christian polling and typically any kind of statistics that you see about Christianity in America is done by the Barna Group. He says this about evangelism: regardless of its true character and intent, the Christian community is not known for love, nor for a life-transforming faith. Outdated means of outreach, inappropriate assumptions about people's faith, and the lack of passion for helping non-believers to receive God's love and acceptance are hindering the church from fulfilling its mandate. That's the reality is the majority of people who we interact with feel uncomfortable about evangelism. The majority of us feel uncomfortable about evangelism. And so over in 2 Corinthians 5, this is this is really what evangelism is about. 2 Corinthians 5. Wow, you already knew. Spirit moved.
Have you read it?
Yeah, go ahead, read 14 to 21. No, I think we can make Rebecca read it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay,
I'm
go.
thinking I'm almost.
14 through 21.
All right.
Well, thank you.
It says. It reads in the ESV, for the love of Christ controls us, because we have concluded this, that one has died for all, therefore all have died. And he died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. From now on, therefore, we regard no one according to the flesh. Even though we once regarded Christ according to the flesh, we regard him thus no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, and behold, the new has come. All this is from God, who through Christ reconciled us to himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, in Christ God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them, and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. For our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God.
Cool. And this is the heart of evangelism. Right? God's love and grace should move our hearts to share our faith. Like that reconciliation that we have with God, it becomes our ministry. We have the ministry of reconciliation. That we go and we share that with other people and say, you have the opportunity to be reconciled to God. His love and grace for us leads us to become God's ambassadors. They're his representatives on the earth. Right? We become the message. We're the vehicle and the message. And God makes his appeal through us that we show, hey, there's a different way to live in this world. You don't have to be controlled by sin. You can be controlled by God's love. And I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is, does that message connect with those who hear it? Do people we interact with see God's appeal in our interactions with them? And I think this is not a time to talk about all the bad things about our movement. This is not, and it's not a time to justify a lack of conviction about cold contact evangelism. It's a time for us to own the fact that most of the people that we interact with when we're reaching out don't receive the message that we're trying to communicate, right? Most people, what happens is that we interrupt their day. We talk to them about something that they weren't interested in about 10 seconds ago. And we try and convince them to come to something that they didn't want to in the first place. Right? And that doesn't mean that cold contact doesn't work. It does, because the majority of us were reached out to through cold contact. Actually, everybody in this room was. So it works. But I think what we want to look at is, how can we actually communicate the message that God has given us, right? Can communicate it in a way that people actually feel it and understand what God is trying to say. And so my first point is from come and see to go and be. I think we have to shift from proclaiming the good news to becoming the good news. We go from telling people about God to showing them who God is. I was thinking about it's the difference between an instruction manual and an instructor. You could get an instruction manual and you could go through all of the technical details and know how to put together a car engine, but you don't understand how it works or why certain things go where with just the instruction manual. You just have information rather than understanding the reason why you would want to do that. You don't actually understand how it works together unless you have somebody walking with you through that. Over in 1 Corinthians 3, starting in verse 5, it says, "What after all is Apollos, and what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. I planted the seed, Apollos watered, but God made it grow. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The man who plants and the man who waters each have one purpose, and each will be rewarded according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. You know, we all want to reap a harvest, right? We all want to reap a harvest of righteousness. We want to see people get baptized. We want to see people commit their lives to God and go on to do great things. But in order to reap a harvest, we have to first sow and water and tend to the field. And so what does that look like? You know, as a reminder, the person is the soil, not the seed. So as we're looking at this, I think we can look and we think Paul went and sowed a bunch of seed and like the people then grew up and became like, the people are the soil. We are God's field. And so the focus isn't on the seed growing, it's on caring for the soil. Like the growth of the seed is on God. And I think so often we can feel pressure to make the seed grow rather than focusing on tending to the soil. It's all sorts of backwards and it's written so tiny that you can't even see it on the Zoom screen. But we have sow, water, tend, and reap. Yes, that's what those words say. But the key word for sowing is to show. We're going to talk about these things over the next couple weeks, but it's active kindness is another way of talking about it. We've talked about that before. We're going to talk about it again. But the idea is we do this with strangers. And so we sow the word with strangers. We leverage active kindness, right? So sowing seed is not just about handing out an invite. Handing out an invite is a crucial part of that. It's really important because that invite is the seed, but the soil needs to be prepared first. And so we do that by showing them God, right? We want people to see who God is. And we can only do that in interacting with them, right? The goal is to move a person's heart 1% closer to God. That's the goal. That's it. It's not about getting this person to study the Bible. That comes way later. It's about moving their heart closer to God. And we should be sowing seed everywhere we go. Because that's the reality is we have no idea what those seeds are going to do. We should constantly be finding ways to show people God's love. After that, we water the soil. And so water, the key word for that is build. We build relationships with the people who respond to our acts of kindness. Right? And so this is active listening. We'll talk about that later. But the idea is this person moves from a stranger to being an acquaintance, right? You think of somebody who you know their name, you say hi to on the street. That's somebody like you're acquainted with, right? For people on campus, like it's people in your classes, right? People that you recognize. And so we build relationships with people who respond to our acts of kindness, right? With the contact card, they're able to get in touch with us. They're able to interact, like hopefully your phone number's on the back, whatever. But there are opportunities to continue to build further relationships. And this doesn't mean we invite them to church immediately. Again, that comes later. Like that's come and see, right? Inviting them to church is a come and see approach, not a go and be. And so we patiently get to know the person over a lot of small interactions, right? Whether that's grabbing coffee, that's inviting them to like go to a concert, whatever, like finding ways to connect with people and build more of a relationship. The goal is to listen to show that we care. Active listening.
I may be surprised you said No way, you just-
Oh, no way.
Wait a minute.
But that's the goal, is that people won't listen to us until we listen to them. And so active listening, we water. Then we tend to the soil. And so this is the idea of clearing out objects and barriers to growth. Right, so we deepen the friendship. That's the key word there is deepen. Right, we deepen the friendship to go beyond just surface level conversations. We share our lives with people and we step into the deep waters. Right, there's like, hey, how's your week going? How's your day been? Crazy weather, like shallow waters, right? This is the book calls it active wondering, right? We went through all of those questions really quickly that one time when we talked about active wondering. We thought these are really weirdly intimate questions, and I don't know why I would ever ask people these questions, right? I think the one was like, what do you think of 9/11 or something like that?
That was the most.
Right.
Just one, it was like, what do you think now? What?
So, but we deepen that relationship, right? We go from just surface level stuff, talking about, crazy people driving, and we talk about things that really matter. The goal is to develop a connection with the person that is authentic and is vulnerable, right? Something where we're actually able to connect on a heart level. And finally, we reap the harvest. And the key word for that is study, right? For 10, they're at the point of being a friend. That for reaping a harvest, that's studying the Bible with people, right? It's active sharing is another way to say it. And that person is a seeker, somebody who is actually interested in knowing more about who God is, what that means for their life. And we know how to do that part, right? We do that well. But here's the benefit of going through the first 3 steps, is that by the time they get to the point of studying the Bible, we've already built a relationship with them. They have a relationship with the people they're studying with, rather than having to try and build a relationship with somebody as they're studying the Bible. It takes out a lot of the legwork. You already know who this person is. And so you don't have to, you can go quicker because you know what they're going to find difficult. You know them enough to challenge them. When we sow seeds, people may be at all sorts of places. Some people may be ready to study. Some people may not respond to the 1st or the 10th or the 20th active kindness thing that we do. Who knows? But the goal is simply to be faithful with the progression. All we're doing is 1% at a time. We're trying to nudge them closer to God, trying to say, this is who God is. God loves you so much that he put you in my path 20 times to hand out, ramen one time, hand out pumpkin spice latte mix another, and hand out cold water the 3rd time. Like, just God is coming after you. God is coming out after you with reckless love. How about that? But people could be at any point along here, right? I mean, we know that. We study the Bible with tons of people without doing the first 3. Right? But it's being patient with where people are at. And that's the goal, is that we're able to actually meet people where they're at, rather than just saying, you're not interested in studying the Bible, I have nothing to offer. And for the campus students, we can pretty easily just skip to building friendships. Like, there are, 1, everybody's looking for friends on a college campus. 2, like, there are so many shared points of contact, right? Out in the world, it's like, I have no clue what you do. On a college campus, it's like, I know you're here for school. And so there's just a natural level, like, a lot of times we can just skip over some of these things because we're all doing the same thing. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about each of these steps in a little bit more depth. But the reality is that these things are worthless if we aren't willing to put ourselves in environments with other people. What? It's true. So my second point is charging the gates. Over in Matthew 16. This one's fun. This one's real fun. Matthew 16, verses 13 through 20. That's Sadducees, not Sadducees. 16, verses 13 through 20. So starting in verse 13, it says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he warned his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. And so Jesus says here to Peter, I'm going to build the church on you. You are the foundation of the church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. That's weird, because gates are a defensive structure. Gates don't overcome anything unless they're being attacked. And so that means that God's kingdom's on the offensive. Jesus says, whatever Peter binds or looses on earth will be bound and loosed in heaven. And this concept is that Peter sets the rules and guidelines for the church to follow, for better or for worse. We actually see this later in Acts 2 when Peter lays out the guidelines for salvation. He's actually binding and loosing in Acts 2. He says, repent and be baptized. And so Peter is in charge of drawing up the battle plan, but the goal is set. Jesus tells Peter, the church is going to hell and back for people. And that's the mission that Jesus gives him. And so the question is, will you? The people we are trying to reach are complete pagans. They drink, smoke, curse, worship idols, are self-centered, lie, steal, are greedy, are sexually immoral, and may have no conscience whatsoever. And they may. I'm not saying that they have. I'm just saying they may have no conscience. And so are you willing to surround yourself with that kind of a person? Or are you too self-righteous to care for people who sin? To be clear, this doesn't mean that we go sin it up in some strip club or something, like that's not, we're still called to be righteous. Saying. We have to be willing to meet people where they're at. And so does the gospel extend to those in dire circumstances, to people who live radically different lives than we do? Or do we simply preach a middle-class gospel? One that's okay with just finding people who are only a little sinful. They're not super rich and completely unaware of, their life isn't perfect. They're not, the down and out and the downtrodden that have tons of problems and sinful tendencies. They're people who are like mostly good and, they sin some a little bit and we help them to like, sin a little less.
So then you like that.
What? No.
It's a nonprofit beside the homeless shelter. They keep drug addicts, who have kids.
Oh.
And give them mom a chance to have their kids live in their street.
Yeah.
They do
I'm
a
really bad
pantry
one about
or-
my
they do like a food thing
Terrible.
on Saturday.
Oh.
They do a food thing on Saturday.
But yeah, like, are we okay with reaching out to those kind of people? The people who have desperate addictions and debilitating things in their lives? Or are we just looking for people who, have a job, work a 9 to 5, can show up to midweek in church on Sunday? Like, God says all nations, to the ends of the earth. That is our evangelistic goal, is the ends of the earth. One of the other things that one of the costs that we have to consider is the judgment that we receive from other Christians. You end up in a bar and you're, you start hanging out with people who drink a lot, do drugs, whatever. All of a sudden, there are a lot of questions that people have for you. I know this firsthand. Hearing some of you people joke about my drinking habit, I think about it sometimes. I'm like, if somebody heard that joke, they would think I'm an alcoholic. I am not an alcoholic. And I don't really care one way or another. Make all your jokes, whatever. And if you do have legitimate concerns, come talk to me. But the reality is there's a wide range. There's room for a wide range of convictions, and God uses all sorts of people to reach all sorts of people. But if we're going to reach pagans, we're going to end up in pretty pagan places. And that doesn't go over well with everyone. And so are you willing to have the hard conversations about your character? Right? That person who comes up and goes, hey, I really think you need to reconsider this. And you go, yeah, I mean, I've read the Bible. Like, I feel pretty confident in my convictions. And they go, no, I think you really should reconsider this. And then the next week, it's the same conversation over again. Right? Are you willing to humbly listen to people who challenge your convictions? We're called to charge the gates. And so how is God calling you to respond to that call? And so we're going to close out with some discussion questions. The first one is, how is your personal ministry? So if you are just by yourself, you're thinking of the people who you reach out to, study the Bible with, how is your personal ministry going? Number 2 is, how do you feel about charging the gates? Going to hell and back for people is a challenging concept. And so how do you feel about that? And number 3 is, which of these stages you feel is the most challenging for you? Whether that's sowing, watering, tending, or reaping. Which stage is most challenging for you? Tending?
And I'm broken with the service relationship. I mean, so I hope that maybe, and I'm like,
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Why do you have a problem with vulnerability?
You don't have to.
Yeah, other responses, thoughts, comments, concerns? Anybody want to rebuke me?
I feel like with my personal ministry, I don't know, I feel like, at the retreat, we were kind of challenged at one of the lessons to like have the hard conversations with people and stuff. And when I first became a Christian, like I was real nervous to kind of like reach out to my family and friends. Like that's just, it's still something that I'm scared about, but like for the past couple of years, like I've gotten more comfortable with, like, I'm now known as like the really religious one in my friends. And, like, I am the Jesus freak in my but they love me for it. But like, so I think I'm in my personal ministry, like I feel like I'm doing the first ones, but now it's the second couple ones where it's like sowing those and like reaping.
Yeah.
And I'm like, now like I'm having the conversations with people about their spiritual life and like I'm having those conversations, which I love. But now it's like, okay, like how now do I challenge my family and loved ones, and like how do I have those hard conversations, like, like you might not be going to heaven.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny because like then I feel like here it's more the opposite. Like since I don't have those like super deep relationships, like all like from childhood, it's not as like I have to build those before I can even have it's a lot easier just to do the Bible studies and then after that become friends. So I think it's like kind of flipped where I'm at. But I feel the biggest pull towards like my family and friends. Like I want to ask them those questions. Like I don't want to have regrets. And I feel like I've been kind of slipping in that area. And I think I don't want them to, I'm scared that like Jesus.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I like whispered it and then she started responding. I was like, what is going on?
Oh, I asked that she's like,
No, I just think I'm scared that if they, if I tell them and they say no, then it's like, that's it. Like I feel like I have to take a good shot and like make my shot count.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
Let me ask you, I have a buddy. I got a buddy. I got a buddy, he is in the military. He smokes weed, he drinks, and he loves that life. We're good friends and we've hung out, we've had drinks together.
Yeah.
It's been a good time. And he also knows I'm a Christian. He knows about all my convictions. He's told me he really appreciates me for that and that I'm not stuck up and judgmental towards him for going out and like having a drink. Where would you say I'm at? And on that scale?
Yeah, I think.
Because that's where we're at. I've asked him to come to church.
Yeah.
Once or twice before, and he's open to it, unless that's not that.
Yeah, and I think that's, I would think that that's more at like a deepening level of like, deepening is a tricky one because you're starting to ask questions like, what do you think happens after you die?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, and I think that that's not a method to get somebody to study the Bible. It's just, you're literally like, you're just trying to build a deep enough friendship to show like, hey, I don't just care about, the weather and like your value to me is beyond just, we like to talk about football. Like, and so I think it's asking those questions, not thinking, oh, this is how I'm going to get them to study. Like it's asking those questions and legitimately just think like, what do you think? Like I think of people who are willing to get into like deep conversations quickly. Like I love interacting with people like that, where it's like all the like you're on some like philosophical journey or whatever, and you're talking about like these deep, intimate things. And I think that it's taking that and being able to get to that level with people who we don't have that depth yet. I don't know if that makes sense.
What if they say hopefully nothing? Because I've had that. Like me and my friends will be talking and I'm like, oh, you know, like, hopefully I'm gonna hell. She's like, hopefully there is a sweet blackness of nothing. I'm like, girl, we got other things to talk about. But like,
Well, I think it's like, okay, like what what do you hope that? That's kind of scary. It's terrifying. Like, why? You know?
I mean, she told me her reasoning. It was like, she's like, life is so busy and thought I would like, you could not have.
Yeah.
Like life after life sounds even more
Yeah.
interesting to her. Nothing. But like, would heaven be her sitting in a dark room? I don't know.
But I think like it's having those conversations that open up more opportunities to understand, like, you know, I don't know, like, what do you think happens after you die? Well, like, I hope black nothingness. You're like, oh, why? It's like, well, like, you know, as a kid, like my grandfather was really abusive or something like that, and like he was a really religious person, so I hope like he's not making, you know, like, you know what I mean? You get into like the deeper things about people, and I think that when you know somebody on that level, it changes the, hey, like, you should come to church with me. Like now it's not just some stranger, like now it's, oh, my friend Cody, like, you know, the guy who I told about my childhood trauma that I haven't talked about in 20 years. Like there's a different level and different depth to, you know, I think that's where something like inviting people to church, like, that's a radically different invite than, hey man, we're handing out pumpkin spice latte mix, like, you should come to church. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. No whispering.
I wasn't whispering, I was thinking out loud.
Think out loud louder, okay?
No, I was gonna say, we talked about trauma in children when I first met you. Right, talking about books. That sounds sketchy.
Ashley Moore, an example of somebody who talks about deep things the first time you meet them.
What was her
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, any other thoughts?
I feel like for me, so this, I feel like so almost didn't exist for me. Cause like I'm pretty like, I go up and I'm like, let's do this. Like,
Yeah.
I know you. Like, not like.
That's your opener. Hey, I know you.
Honestly, that's where- But it's very unique, like I don't know. And I feel like it's something that it can be good and bad because depending on who it is. But like a lot of my relationships get somewhere between water and tin. And they just kind of like the better ones will get to 10 and then like it's almost reap, like it's almost there, you know? And so like it just kind of, it's like this limbo of like being between, I've built with them, I've listened to them, and then I went deeper. We've kind of gotten another layer or two under, and then sometimes it's them on their side, they just maybe there's pushback, and that's kind of, you know, that's one of my relationships recently. I remember I was inviting them to stuff, and somebody I've known for a long time, like almost as long as Cody, Clement, but you know, he was like, it's just not my thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like a little pushback from him, or some of them are a little different. I feel like, so yeah, I feel like the hardest part for me is probably that transition from tin to reap.
Yeah.
Really kind of like, I don't, it's either impatience or just, I don't know, not knowing the right methodology to do it. But then, so for my personal, I feel like for my personal ministry, I feel like it's okay. I feel like I've got people in all parts of it, I feel like. And I feel like that's an okay thing to have. I think about it, you might want to just have, I don't know, there's not like a meta for it, or like a one way to do it, but like just having a few people scattered here and there, it's like, it shows that I'm trying to get, trying to make friends.
Yeah.
This one, my coworker, I feel like I tried to get him from so to read at first immediately. Where I was like, come to our house. Come to our house and eat our food. So, I've been watering him, been building that relationship. And I feel like we're getting pretty close. We're like, we're hitting that stride of like texting like memes and gifs. So I feel like that's a good start.
Whoa. That's, you're deepening right there.
That's
Yeah.
Steve is my relationship.
We'll notice.
Hey, that's Bible study.
He's right.
Yeah, what's interesting is how do people move through this? It's not a funnel. But how do people move from one thing to the next?
Like personally or just?
I
in
got it,
general?
right? All right.
Are you saying like from top to bottom?
My gut's pretty good.
Are you saying so like so show?
How do people go from so to like, how do you move them from soda to
I
water?
come up and I tell them, you are now going into the water. No, they're not building with me. Yeah.
I like to go eat it. I like to go
You got an answer?
I
That's
feel like-
that's what you said. You said.
You
Bob said
said
it.
it. Yeah, that's true.
You said-
I feel like you can't force people. I feel like you can't force anyone, like what Jacob's saying, like you can be as good of a friend as you want and get to the 10 stage, and if the person's not ready to, they don't want to say about the next thing, it could have been a great friend, and like you can still be a good friend, but I think it's the heart change.
Yeah,
Sometimes the soul is just that.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
You have to alternate your crops. Sometimes the soil just loses all nutrients and you get nothing. That's really difficult.
Well, when you have a monoculture. Rotate your crops. But anyway,
Try sowing like normal.
so the way, so actually God doesn't even move people through these stages. God makes the seed grow. But people choose. And so there's nothing we can actually do to move people from tend to read. We just have to wait for them to choose that. And so what happens though is that we're at sow and we're like, I want to get you to read. And so we try like setting a Bible study with somebody who's at sow. And then they feel real weird about it because they're at the wrong stage and we're doing the like. And so I think there's a level of like, it's being patient with people. I think the other thing is that each of these takes a different level of time. Sowing is very minimal time with people. Even watering is not a ton of time. Like, obviously, being friends with somebody requires a lot more effort and, diligence and studying the Bible. We know how much time that takes. But I think there's a progression in terms of how much time we spend with people and in that relationship. Yeah, so does that make sense?
So are you supposed to stop trying if they just aren't into it?
What do you mean?
Like, okay, like he said his friend or one of you said your friend church and they're like, it's not my thing, I'm pretty sure it's you. And then like a few months later and you're like, hey, Jesus, and they're like, still not my thing.
Well, I think
Or
it's,
they're like, okay, we'll talk, I love the devil. You see what I'm saying?
well, I think that it's, being patient with, I think wherever people are at, you stay in that until they move somewhere different.
What if they move back?
Well, that's what I'm saying is like, then if your question, if you're trying to reap somebody who's at 10, it's not gonna work. It's actually gonna be more detrimental. And so somebody's at 10, cool. Like the goal of pending is to deepen. It's not to study. And so then we just continue to deepen. We deepen until they transition to the point where they're ready to study.
I have a question.
Yes.
In this hypothetical sewing water pending and reaping,
Yes.
is it better in your, like, just, I'm just curious what people's thoughts are, because I think sometimes for me, it's easier, like a sewing stage. I feel like to just like meet people close contact, especially, like to just kind of like shoot your shot and be like, come to Bible talk or Bible session. Like, it doesn't really work that well. And personally for me, like, as long as I'm like actually connecting with those people, I find it a lot easier to be like, hey, like, you guys are really cool. Let's get coffee sometime.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I kind of struggle with those too. Like, obviously, I think there's points where it's like, we're not connecting, take the card, thank you.
You know, the Bible.
My numbers. You wanna call it.
But it is, yeah, I think it's like, you know, I think there's I think when we're sewing, I think invites are obviously a part of that, because you never know where somebody's at. Like, you may think they're at sew and they're at reap, and so the invite gives them contact, lets them reach out, like, whatever, but I think that's a perfectly like, ultimately, evangelism makes us weird. Like,
Before that.
evangelism makes the rest of us weird. Like, we do things in evangelism that we would never do in any other context. And so part of it is retraining our brain to realize, oh, it's weird for me to like invite somebody to something and then not like invite a complete stranger, like, hey, we're playing D&D later today, like, you want to join? Any other context, that's weird.
Yeah.
Right, like, nobody invites
Don't knock
you
it till you try it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, you have one very trusting person who may show up to that, like, and so I think getting coffee with people and building relationships, that's part of it, like the process. I think it's widening our view of our, like, the little things that we do and the impact that God can have through those things. You know, I think one of the most impactful things for me in my discipleship is watching people raise their kids. Like, watching them parent has helped me grow more than anything. And I think it's recognizing that we all have opportunities like that, like getting coffee with someone. I mean, I got coffee with a kid who was studying the Bible and no longer is. I mean, I'm not trying to track him down, but like, we got coffee and it was like therapeutic for him to talk about. He works as an EMT, and like, just the day before had seen like a gunshot victim, had like all sorts of stuff, and it was like therapy for him to like talk about these things. And I think that, like, that's the power of just listening. Like, he's not at a reap stage. It's all over the place. Like, he's not at a spot where he's ready to study the Bible. And so, and I think I started by inviting him out, asking him if he wanted to study the Bible, and he said yes. So I jumped to read, like, and so I think it's changing our perspective on the pacing of evangelism. And I don't think these things have to take a super long time, but I think for people who don't move quickly to reap, we're going to damage the relationship more by jumping to reap than anything else. And so I think it helps us to be patient with where people are at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, hunt down that couple from Saturday.
Do you think there's a divide between water and tend? As in like sowing and watering being our job, and that's something we can progress in, like going to the gym, seeing someone over and over again. Talk to them, hey, you know, I go to church, blah, 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 you know, what's your name, whatever. And then acquaintancing, because you see them and chit chat here and there in the gym. But then like, once you get to that point, like, hey, would you like to go to my house? Like, to tend and deepen and to wander with them and become friends, would you say that that could possibly almost be in their ballpark? Because you can't force someone to be a friend.
No.
Right? If you invite them, they say no.
I think it's about creating the opportunity. So ultimately, so there's you think of a parent-child relationship, there's a greater and a lesser partner in that, right? The parent is the greater partner. They're the one that's responsible for taking care of the kid, whatever. The greater partner is responsible for providing the availability for a relationship. The lesser partner determines what that relationship looks like. So the parent provides an opportunity to develop a relationship. The kid actually sets what that relationship looks like. And I think we're the greater partner in this. We provide the opportunity, and then the person determines what that relationship looks
So I'm gonna provide that. I didn't so many. Let me come over to your. Yeah, that was, yeah, I was right for 10. In there.
Yeah, so does that make sense? Yeah, any other questions online? Thoughts? Questions, concerns?
Or that, no.
So,
Can you skip the friend?
It's up to them, I would feel.
Yeah, I
It's
get
like,
it.
there's some people like, it's like being at work. Yeah, but I wouldn't say that I don't think about it.
Yeah,
It's someone
I'd say like campus swaps, almost a perfect example for skipping 10. You don't,
yeah.
like, you don't tend hardly at all on a
Right.
campus swap. You go to some other campus and you're like, go say the Bible, yeah, what's your name? I don't care. Right, so let's go to this. Yeah, still, but that's the point.
Yeah.
Like, I'm joking, I've been like, okay, we're like halfway through it, all right, let's go. Yeah, I don't even know you.
Right, and that's the thing, like, some people, you won't have to. You don't have to build a friendship with them. Because they're just like, I want to know God. Like, cool, let's study, like, let's actually talk about it, you know? But I think the danger is thinking everybody is like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the assumptions that we make is, oh, that person's not interested, so they'll never be interested. And it's like, no, like they're just not at that stage yet. And I think the way that we typically handle it is we're like, hey, do you want to study the Bible? No? Okay, I'll check back in 6 months. And we're like waiting for them to get to read without putting in any of the work beforehand. And so I think it's realigning how we build relationships with people. You know, recognizing like, okay, some people may say, yeah, I want to study the Bible. Some people just aren't there yet, and all right, like I'm just gonna take my time, you know, and that's okay.
Different fruit bearing trees take longer. to
Yeah.
Fruit
Old good metaphor.
than others, right?
And-
Well,
and-
I was like,
And we may be sowing seeds that we never reap. We may sow seeds, and a Paul may come along or an Apollos may come along and water, tend, and reap those seeds. And we never see the fruit there, because that's not what we're called to. And I think so it's identifying what is God calling me to sow, water, tend, or reap with this person. And trusting that, okay, I'm gonna, you know, I mean, your National Guard buddy, who knows? maybe it's not until he has, you know, his sixth kid that he realizes that, oh, like I want these kids to grow up in church, and that's when he starts to seek, like, you know, who knows? So, yeah.
It's good. This is good chewable.
Chewable.
Stuff. It's good.
Chewable. It's like the little Flintstone gummies.
Yeah, I feel like the most very vital tool in the arsenal is to like be able to like get a feel for like where people are.
Yeah,
And understand.
yeah.
Yes.
And that's what, you know, over the next couple of weeks, that's what we're gonna talk about. Is kind of diving into each of these 4 areas a little bit more specifically and talk about, okay, how do we do these things? I don't know what those things are yet, because I haven't read the chapter yet, so TBD, but yeah, that's kind of where we're heading with it. So, yeah, in terms of announcements, campus, we have Bible talk tomorrow at 7 o'clock in between the freshman dorms. We'll see if anybody shows up, who knows? It's a terribly attended Bible talk right now, so outside of that, church this Sunday is in Charleston. It is our Thanksgiving potluck, KBC Thanksgiving. So if you haven't signed up for things, sign up for things. I'd like to give Rebecca a big shout out for Big Mama's cinnamon cake.
Did you see my thing?
I did,
Big Mama's cinnamon. cake.
yeah.
Actually, I was gonna write Big Mama's famous in capital letters, and then I left that.
Who is Big Mama?
You know, listen.
I was like, what is Big Mama?
There's a story behind it, but I don't know if we'll share.
We'll talk about it.
It's a short story.
But yes, Big Mama's cinnamon roll cake will be there. I'm also making rolls, so
Yeah, lots of albums.
all the rolls.
You got some cheesy rolls.
What?
But we're doing the cheese ball.
Maybe, yeah. I was gonna, whatever. We'll figure out what roles we're doing. But yeah, that is this Sunday. Midweek next week, we'll be right back here. Make sure to shoot your Christmas party videos. Get them done.
Yeah, 18 days.
18 days.
That is said, thanks.
Everyone. Good.
It's got a QR code and a link. And it links directly to a shared drive where you can just drag and drop your final video.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so I sent it off to Rich, they've got it,
Cool.
they'll be
Oh,
putting up
that's,
the graphic, hopefully people will just be able to
Yeah.
scan it, do it there.
Yeah. Other than that, I think there was a discussion at some point of. Hey. Are we all listening?
No.
Just the men. I think there was discussion at some point of doing a Huntington Thanksgiving.
Friendsgiving,
Yeah, doing like a Huntington Thanksgiving.
I'm down.
I don't know what. Does anybody have any details on that? Or any thoughts about that?
A Huntington Friendsgiving? I didn't know there was even gonna be one.
My entire family will be in town. That's the only information I got.
That means we get carne asada for Thanksgiving.
So this is, yeah, you're talking about, Mika, you're talking about for like Thanksgiving Day?
We don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think there was talk of doing like a Friendsgiving
I don't know that happened.
thing.
I have.
Yeah, we could, I mean, if Chelsea's okay with it, we could definitely probably host something like that. We've done it before where we shake, you know,
Yeah,
Yeah,
we go sit at the table.
we got next 2 weeks. Nice opportunity. I feel like Thanksgiving is kind of hectic though. So,
yeah. Oh, we're not gonna do it.
I just, what Pearl had said was if she got off of work, they would like to host it, that if they didn't host it, now it might be Christmas thing.
Okay, You-
She had said either the first weekend of November or the second weekend of November, but she said she doesn't have a work schedule, so. So then I said that maybe we would still do something, as in, like, if you guys couldn't host, we would host it somewhere else, but if it's gonna be. More. I think it's better idea just to think of Christmas, like, thing, then.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so TBD, we'll.
Pearl and I would love to have all of that.
You mean Pearl would love to have everybody.
Thanksgiving and Christmas.
We could do it.
Cool, I think that is all we got in terms of announcements. Unless I'm forgetting something, so.
Well, we're gonna do 29.